What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast. It's a bleak week for the New England Patriots. They're 1-3. Their layup game against the Miami Dolphins suddenly looks like they're shooting on about a 22-foot rim. We're going to bring Phil Perry in just a moment. But considering the Patriots right now, I want to say, to keep things in perspective, we don't need to overcorrect and pin the needle every single time something new happens. For instance, week 1, Patriots beat Cincinnati. Playoff bound? Not exactly. That game was aided by about 13 to 16 points worth of Cincinnati mistakes and the Patriots capitalizing. Now, week 4, bad as that looked, it was a bad spot against a very good team all the way over on the West Coast, and you had injuries piled on top of your existing injuries. It was a beatdown. We kind of expected that. I will say, though, that doesn't lessen the dire straits the Patriots are in the immediate future. Because think about it, weakest roster in the league, bar none. And that weak roster has now lost probably 4 or 5 of its 10 best players. Think about it. Andrews is going to reportedly have surgery, so you've lost your center. He's one of the 10 best. Barmore, certainly. Juwan Bentley fits in the top 10. Kyle Duggar's hurt, so there's 4 of your top 10. Drake Maye might be one of your top 10 players, at least talent-wise. He's sitting on the bench. That's half of them. Okay? So you got a weak roster and half of your best players are on the bench. This is bad because the Patriots were in a spot now in the next 5 games where they could have gotten the course corrected. That's probably not going to happen now. Other teams are looking at the Patriots and saying, yes, that's a team in disarray. We can feast. None of this should come as a surprise. Talked about it on Quick Slants. We'll talk about it a little bit more with Phil. Robert Kraft, the owner, I'm sure he's not surprised wherever he is. Probably tearing his hair out, but he's not surprised. It's brought to you by Shaw's, perfecting the art of fresh. Robert?
My hope and expectations is to make the playoffs. That's something realistically. We have a new leadership team. We're going to have a lot of young players. We don't know. You know, a lot can happen. We might struggle more than I want, but the good news, and when you're running any business, is you try to figure out what the key variables are, and then you try to put people in place that you think can react and adapt to what has to happen. I really feel we have a good young team, and I just hope we don't struggle.
So this is, again, a we'll see how it goes season. Fingers crossed, whistling past the graveyard. But at least the team has finally stopped deluding itself. They needed a radical rebuild. This year, ugly as it is in real time, had to happen in the wake of that 4-13 season that announced to everyone that the gig was up. The dynasty had breathed its last. They've been trying to chase who they were for the better part of a decade. And that's something I talked about this past weekend in Post Game Live. I'm going to run that back because when you think about it in perspective, the Patriots have continued to look in the mirror and seen the Patriots of 01 to 2016. And that team never existed as they chased it for the last 8 years. This is a team that has been looking in the mirror and seeing something totally different since 2017. Okay, that was the year that Bill Belichick really started to say, you know what, I can live without Tom. We can live without Tom. Well, okay, you didn't. You thought you'd be fine against Nick Foles in the Super Bowl? You weren't. 2018, the Patriots won the Super Bowl. They went 11-5. All 5 of those losses came to non-playoff teams like the Lions, the Titans, the Jaguars. They were already on a downward spiral. They got 3 great matchups in the playoffs, took care of business thanks to Brady, Gronkowski, and Edelman in 2018. Boom, Super Bowl. God bless them for getting it. 2019, 8-0. Brady knew what was going on. They were on the way down. Belichick, what do I care? What's going to happen? What's the worst that can happen? 2020 happens, 2021, they bring somebody in. We're all fixed. We're going to be great. What's the worst that can happen if Josh leaves and I hire Matt and I hire Joe Judge? So they look in the mirror as an organization and see a team that is similar to the one that they were in 2006, 7, 12, 13, 14, as if they have talent all over the place. They don't. They have been so horrendous at drafting, so horrendous at free agent acquisition, and so impressed with the smell of their own farts that they don't understand that they're not good at acquiring good players anymore. So, in actuality, the first step for the Patriots was moving on from Bill. and then seeing where things looked after that. It's basically like buying a house that you have to tear down and then seeing what you can salvage. And we're watching it happen in real time. What can be salvaged? What's usable next year and in the future? The Patriots were in a position where they couldn't go through a coaching search because there was a level of dignity you had to attach to Bill Belichick where he finished the season. You went through the exercise of having a parting of the ways as opposed to a firing, and then elevating somebody that you had agreed to elevate. Everything was accelerated by a year. Bill wasn't supposed to go 4-13 last year. He was supposed to get his 15 or 16 wins over the next 2 years and ride off into the sunset. Then Mayo took over. Well, now you have an inexperienced coach running a talentless team with a very inexperienced GM. So nobody should really be surprised that it looks this way. They're taking on water. Gerard Mayo on Wednesday talking about the situation he finds his team in.
For us, it's about mental toughness. It's about mental agility. And we won't be rigid in our thought, and we're going to try to put the best team out there. I'm not really a big woe is me or anything like that. We knew going into the season we would take our lumps. And even after the first game, when we beat Cincinnati, we understood that this is unsustainable as far as winning that way. With that being said, there have been things that we've done well, especially after the first 2 games. Those were competitive games. The third one wasn't so competitive, and this past one, we still had an opportunity as bad as we played. And I think it still comes down to execution.
All right, I got to bring in my best buddy right now, Phil Perry. Phil, this soft part of the schedule has really deteriorated into just another gauntlet of teams.
There's no such thing as a soft part of the schedule for this Patriots team. When you are who they are, when you're built the way they're built, there's no such thing. So there is no given, even if it's Snoop Huntley and the Miami Dolphins, who are, believe it or not, slated to make the number 2 overall selection in next year's NFL draft, 1 spot ahead of the New England Patriots.
It is something, and as we watched, Miami looked worse than the Patriots this past Monday night. But the loss of Andrews and the fact that a team will have all week to prepare, even if they don't have Jalen Phillips, for instance, Miami's going to do what the Jets did, going to do what the Niners did. They're going to exploit a Patriots offensive line and send everybody but Mark Duper and Mark Clayton after Jacoby Brissett. A.J. Dewey is going to be chasing his ass around.
Wow. What about, I thought you might go with Andrew Van Ginkel, who's no longer on the Dolphins.
Oh, damn, Van Ginkel.
He was a real problem for a couple of years there.
He was. Watch out for the Ginkel.
That's what they're going to do, and until the Patriots prove they can stop these guys, they're going to continue to face that. I know Dante Scarnecchia told you that the other day on the podcast. They didn't do a good job of stopping it the other day. It's going to continue to happen. The injuries are still an issue. I will say, just got off the Patriots practice field, Vidarian Lowe looked like he was participating a little bit more, so maybe there's a chance he's back at left tackle. But you had Nick Leverett and Layden Robinson, it looked like, were at least limited. We'll see what the injury report ends up saying. But those are 2 guys that you thought would be starters with David Andrews out. And I'm not even sure how ready they'll be, Tom. So the revolving door on the offensive line continues in any NFL defense. I don't care how bad you are. We'll have opportunities to make big plays against this unit the way it's constructed.
I wonder if the Patriots are currently in a situation where they have either starting or as the next man up players who could not be on the practice squads of other teams.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
They might.
Nick Leverett is somebody who has played NFL football.
Right, but I'm looking at the Michael Jordans, for instance, who's hurt now, and he played fine for a week relative to what you expected, but they are digging deep.
He is on the active roster, but he was initially a practice squad guy. You're right. And so is that where
if you're on
he
the
belongs in all likelihood?
Squad, you might not be on anybody else's practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a terribly unfair thing to say. And I think when you just combine the fact that everything is so new this year, this is what was relayed to me in the locker room today, because they would acknowledge they've been horrible offensively. It's a new offensive coordinator with a new system and a new offensive line coach. And now, on top of all of those things, you are adding new faces into the lineup on the offensive line week after week after week. And it's making it really hard for them to find any kind of footing.
You look at the Drake Maye and Jacoby Brissett conversation that's ongoing, and I've been of a mind that you leave Jacoby Brissett in there. And I become less and less adamant about that stance the more I talk to people who I like and respect. Phil being one of them, believe it or not. There's a lot of I see your point to it. I can't do it, though, yet because you have to be able to account for the chaos. You can't put somebody in who, as Dante Scarnecchia said last week, could be in a position where it's going to look like recess. You're guaranteed to have recess out there if it's Nick Leverett and Vidarian Lowe and Michael Jordan and just the array of players who are most likely to be out there. And once the game starts, you're going to lose players because they're trying to play through injury. So, to me, can you make the case for May still with that kind of chaos, or would you want it to settle?
The case for May, for me, is that they're the worst offense in football. And this is one of those situations, Tom, where the easiest answer might be the right one. Who is the player who touches the football on every single play? Who is not in the game on a week-to-week basis despite having an incredibly high-value draft pick expended upon him? Who is the player that players are seeing practice really well on a week-to-week basis with 30% of the first-team reps, which is unusual, and has all kinds of physical talent and was outplaying the guy who's starting right now by the end of training camp? And so you have all these offensive players specifically, and you could even throw the defensive players in there too. And they're out there every single week, and they're sacrificing themselves, and they're getting injured, and they're grinding away, trying to win football games. And their offense is arguably the worst in football. Mm-hmm. And the number 3 pick is just sitting there. At what point do the players look at it and say, are you trying to help us out here or not? Can we get that guy on the field? It feels like he might be able to help us here. So the reasons for not playing May are obvious. I just think you have to take into account that this is a human being-filled locker room. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to establish something, and if you're trying to create a culture of winning, you might have to pull that lever eventually. And that's acknowledging Jacoby Brissett is not their primary problem, Tom. I've said that over and over and over again. But Drake Maye might be able to do some things that would help the offense improve a bit.
Here's the thing. I mean, I get the plan. I get the logic behind it. I have no doubt. I think anybody who's watching the Patriots this year understands what the plan is. Let the kid develop as long as he possibly can. But when circumstances surrounding the team make that plan obsolete, you have to have a plan B. Everybody has to have a plan B. And plan B is, sorry, we needed you before we wanted to. This is not ideal. Get in there and knock them dead, baby. I mean, they're going to have to get to that point. And I still wouldn't say it could be this week, but if Jacoby starts 6 for 13 for 4 yards, that would be one of the worst yards per attempt in the history of the sport. But
you'd have a few losses
on best case scenario. The
there.
Patriots will work. Their plan was based on a best case scenario. Okay? There's also an emergency plan. It's an emergency, folks.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario was not that it would ever look like the Packers with Favre or the Packers with Rodgers or the Chiefs with Alex Smith. Those were teams with either Hall of Fame guys or, in the Chiefs' case, a playoff team that I believe in Alex Smith's last season as a starter either led the league in passing or was in the top 5. This isn't that. You could sell it to the locker room. Again, I'll come back to that because I think, fans is one thing, and there are a lot of people out there that I know want to see Drake Maye, and I totally get it. I understand why. You shouldn't be making decisions based on what the fans are looking for. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even saying you should be making decisions based on what the players in the locker room are looking for. I would just be curious to know if at some point there are players in there asking the coaching staff if they're really doing everything they can to help their players succeed. I think you're starting to verge on that point if you're not there yet.
Yeah, if you're putting an embarrassing product on the field and you have something in your back pocket that you're not using, then you're not doing what's best for the team. And that's why Gerard has said, I'm weighing what's best for now and what's best for the future. Sometimes what's best for the future might be saying to everyone, I'm not going to be a coach who's going to leave my team out there with no life preserver when I have one potentially right here over my shoulder.
Right, that's the thing. It's tough because you're not sure if he is that life preserver.
But you got to throw something at him.
You're at that point when you're 32nd in the league in a number of different categories. I mean, yards per game, yards per play, quarterback pressure percentage. They're second to last in sack rate, third quickest to allow pressures on average. You have to do something to help ameliorate the situation, which is not just bringing in street free agents to play offensive line for you.
Now, I'm sure you guys are wondering, how did it get this bad on the offensive line? How can it be this embarrassing, where you can't even roll out a professional team and expect it to put a product on the field that's worthy of the entertainment dollar you spend? Should they have done more in the offseason? There really wasn't a ton of people out there. Teams tend to retain their best players. And some of the guys who were out there were really expensive. Tyron Smith, for instance, goes to the Jets. He's fine, good. Patriots lowballed it. But again, to Phil's point, and he made it in the offseason, if you don't have one, to continue to not have one is spending too much money. So how did they get to here? I'm going to roll through some of the draftees since the last time the Patriots took what we would call a remarkable lineman. That was Joe Thuney back in 2016 in the third round. Here's what the Patriots have drafted on the offensive line. 2017, Antonio Garcia, third round. Connor McDermott, seventh. 2018, Isaiah Wynn, first. 2019, Yodny Kajust, Yalta Frohold in the third and fourth. 2020, Mike Onwenu, hey! Justin Haran, both sixth-round picks. Dustin Woodard in the seventh. 2021, Billy Sherman in the sixth. 2022, Cole Strange in the first. Chasen Hines in the sixth. Andy Stuber in the seventh. 2023, Sidy Sow and Antonio Mafi in the fourth. 2024, Caden Wallace, Layden Robinson in the third and the fourth. That's 16 players in 8 drafts, one of whom has gotten a second contract. 2 of whom you could say, okay, Sidy Sow and Mike Onwenu, they're working out. You can also throw in that David Andrews was undrafted free agent, and they've more than gotten their bang for their buck not spent there. But Phil, that's why they are where they are on this offensive line. They couldn't draft, and the same personnel people, minus Bill, are still here. So the idea was, we'll take Bill out, and then these people who were dying for sunlight and to be heard are going to make the decisions. It's going to look better. It doesn't.
The first-round pick whiffs, I think, are the biggest reason why you are where you are. You thought you had a left tackle who had played in the SEC that, Dante Scarnecchia was a huge fan of Isaiah Wynn. Mm-hmm. So that one, that doesn't just fall on Bill Belichick or just fall on any of the personnel people that were there. I mean, that was an organizational wide good pick in their eyes. And it ended up not being a good pick. Cole Strange, it's a massive whiff. I know he's dealt with a lot of injuries, but he hasn't played much football for you. And when he's been on the field, it hasn't been perfect. And so when you're really like Yodny Kajust and even Caden Wallace, like once you get to the third round and beyond at tackle, it's hard to find players there.
But I would
it's the big whiffs that you can't survive.
It's the whiffs when they spend it, and it's the resources spent elsewhere, say in the second round, on a wide receiver like Tyquan Thornton that doesn't work out, or a quarterback like Mac Jones that you submarine so that you can't use him anymore. Those to me
Duke
are the
Dawson, Juwan Williams in the second round. I mean, there are a number of big whiffs there where we could go back and look, and I'm sure there would be an offensive lineman somewhere in the second round or third that if you had really nailed it, you could have found a player there.
So it's maddening, and again, it's the worst roster in football. It's hard earned. All that said, how much blame should we now be assessing to the coaches? How many conclusions should we be drawing and saying these guys are inept?
I think it's really difficult to this point because the talent is what it is. And I have been asking over the course of the last 24 hours or so people about how they've felt about the job Alex Van Pelt has done. Because there are some relatively jarring to see numbers associated with the Patriots offense right now. And it's not just
beyond production.
It's not just production. It's the use of motion at the snap, which is the critical type of motion. A lot of people use, including the Patriots, over half their snaps, they use some kind of motion to just move a player or identify man versus zone. But what the numbers would suggest is motion at the snap is what really is the game changer for offenses across the league. And so the Niners, the Dolphins, when they're at their best, et cetera, these teams use a lot of motion at the snap. The Green Bay Packers. The Patriots are last in the league in terms of using motion at the snap. They're at 8% through 4 weeks.
So static offense that doesn't have a lot of talent, and it's just sitting there in front of people. They could press them and say, well, you're not going to run past me, so we'll press you, and we'll also rotate a safety down in the box, and let's see you try and run on this.
It's interesting you use the word static because I was talking to a Patriots defender last week about the prep for the Niners? So any sort of correlation between the offense you saw every day in training camp and this Niners offense? Because they are from the same tree, right? It's like, well, our offense is a lot more static. There are people moving all over the place for San Francisco. And it's to generate a numbers advantage at times. It's to generate a leverage advantage at times for sort of a slow reacting defense. So that's one area where I would say, are they doing everything they need to do in order to help their offense? And I wrote about this a little bit for NBC Sports Boston.com. But they're in the middle of the pack in the league in terms of screen rate, Tom. I would think they would be near the top of the league in terms of screen rate just to help get them some completions, get it out of Jacoby Brissett's hand more
if you
quickly.
can't spread the field deep, you got to spread it horizontally too.
They're also 23rd according to Next Gen Stats. They're, again, you know you have a bad offensive line. You would think they're doing everything they can to get the football out of Jacoby Brissett's hands really, really quickly. They're 23rd in the league in pass attempts that happen under 2.5 seconds after the snap.
I think that's on Jacoby, and I bet you would agree to an extent.
I think part of that is his game. I think it's also partly the way this offense is run. This is based on my understanding.
Because here's an interesting thing. He's only got 1.6 seconds to throw, according to Pro Football Reference, before the ball either comes out of his hand or the pocket collapses. And that's an astoundingly low number as I looked at it. But the time it actually takes for him to throw the ball, your time to throw stat, is longer because even though the pocket's collapsing, you can still see Jacoby with the ball over his head and 9 guys around him.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's him or if it's the offense. I really don't, because I believe he knows that he has outlet options on every play. I don't sense from the people I talk to any frustration with the scheme itself. Boy, if we could just get somebody open a little bit more quickly, and the ball would be out, and we wouldn't have to be taking as many quarterback hits as we're taking. I'm not getting that. But my understanding of this West Coast offense is you trust your feet, and you go from read number 1 to number 2 to maybe number 3, and then you're checked down, right? I think by the time I think he's trying to operate it in the proper fashion, but in doing so, he gets to say his second read, and there's already somebody on him. So that quick release option, he almost never even gets to that guy because the play's already been destroyed. My question would be, can you draw something up where it's, see if that first guy's open, and if he's not there, then you have something else to throw to that might get you 4 yards. They need more of those short, quick, out-of-your-hands completions because the pressure has become overwhelming.
All right, well, like we said, they're not going to cancel the season. They're going to play the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. Is there a pathway to winning this game? And you guys are rolling your eyes out there. I can hear them. I can see them. I can feel them. Don't roll your eyes. As bad as the Miami Dolphins look, the Patriots without David Andrews could look worse. Get your boo lungs on. Get your paper bags ready because it's going to be a bad one. Phil?
Paper bag game?
Paper bag game.
Oh.
Could be a paper bag game.
You hate to hear that in week 5. It is a losable game, though. I'll say that. But Tom, there's a path to beating this team. This has been, as bad as the Patriots offense has been, without Tua Tagovailoa, this has been arguably the worst offense in football, as you'd expect with Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle and Snoop, which I just like saying. I don't even know why, but I do find it funny that his nickname is Snoop.
All right. Well, bearing that in mind, I want to get into a segment we like to call Total Insight. Total Insight is a segment where Phil and I will throw out some projected numbers for the game, perhaps from your local prognostication company, and we'll say whether or not it's going to go over or under the total and why. And why. First total for Total Insight. Ramondre Stevenson rushing 58.5 yards. Over or under, Phil?
I'm going to go under there. I think there's a good chance that Ramondre Stevenson's snaps are limited. Drake Maye acknowledged that he's considering that in today's press conference, as he should. I spoke to Ramondre Stevenson in the locker room after that press conference with Mayo, and he said, yeah, it could happen. I just have to kind of roll with whatever decisions they make, but I put the ball on the ground 4 times. Of course it could happen, it being essentially getting benched. I also think Antonio Gibson's been pretty damn good.
I do too.
And some of the numbers would suggest he's been better than Ramondre Stevenson in terms of yards after contact and yards over expected. And so I think they could play Gibson and really not miss all that much.
Be ironic if for the second year in a row, the backup running back is better than the actual starting running back around whom the team is built, because Ezekiel Elliott, all things being equal, was better than Ramondre Stevenson last year. I'll also take the under on Mondre. Next up, Jacoby Brissett passing yards. They have him going off heavy for a 337. No, for 165.5. Over or under the total?
165. So he was in that range. I don't know if that's exactly where he was on Sunday, but he was in the 160s, I believe, on Sunday against the 49ers. I'm going to say under here.
Under where? I've been dying to say that.
Don't you feel like even if Ramondre Stevenson's snaps get reduced, they're still going to want to try to go back to their bread and butter and just try to run the football? And if they have a lead, they're not going to stop running the football?
Yeah, and they'll probably never lose contact with Miami because Miami is inept as well. So we're going to have 261 total yards thrown for between Snoop and Jacoby. Next up, Bob Douglas receiving yards 32.5. I'm going to take the over on that. He might have 32.5 on one reception. They got to get him the ball. He's too good. He's too good to be silent for 5 weeks.
He's too good, and I do think there were opportunities to get him the ball. Again, I don't know the play call. I don't know the progression, and so I think it's important for us to sort of acknowledge that as we critique an offense that is obviously deserving of criticism. But I think Jacoby Brissett probably sees that too. I bet Alex Van Pelt sees that too. Okay, this guy is getting open. And so if he wasn't in the progression, for example, against the Niners on play X, Y, or Z, let's get him into a spot where he is a little bit earlier in the progression, where he is the first guy or the second guy, so that we can get him the football, because he's one of their most dynamic players. He needs to get the ball. I'm going over.
Also, same as Phil said. All right, Phil, Dolphins points, 16.5. They do have a guy named Tyreek Hill. They also have a guy named Jalen Waddle. They got Devon A-Chain. Those guys can motor. I mean, the over is 16.5. What do you like there?
I like going under the 16.5. I'm going under. I think they're going to do a better job of keeping the quarterback in the pocket than they have in recent weeks. They have to. It's just a fundamental thing. They just have to accept it, Tom. Just do what you're being asked to do. Stop trying to get up the field. Stop trying to make a big play. Just keep Snoop Huntley in the pocket and force Snoop Huntley to beat you. I mean, what are we talking about here?
What are we talking about here? Finally, total points, 35.5. I see a 9-8 final.
Stop.
And that's going to be under your Las Vegas total. So 9-8.
You know what I learned?
What?
Speaking of a 1-point differential in a football game, did you know there's a way to score 1 point?
Off the field goal, off the extra point.
Off the extra point. If you block the extra point, you recover it in the end zone, and the kicking team tackles you in the end zone, that's called an extra point safety. And it's worth 1 point.
To who?
To the kicking team. So they missed the kick, but they tackled you in your end zone.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's 1 point.
I had no idea. But there can never be a 1-0
You need
score.
can you incorporate that into one of your absurd predictions one of these weeks?
Yes.
Please do.
This week is the
Keon
week.
White blocks an extra point, but it's recovered by Marcus Jones, and he actually gets tackled in their own end zone.
He gets upended by Devon A-Chain, who shouldn't even have been on the special teams on the post on the point after.
The Dolphins
team
get a
anyway.
point.
Total points 35.5. No flipping way, right?
No, I can't see it. No, I'm going under. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry, everyone who enjoys offensive football.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's Total Insight. Total Insight. And I'm going to ask you one more question, because on our television programs, it's going to be wall-to-wall, and I'm sure it's already wall-to-wall on the radio. Disaster. There's no way to fix it. They're screwed forever. Cancel the season. I do think that the dysfunction is creeping and things are teetering, but I don't know how bad it can get. It's a bad team that's losing games and doesn't have the cavalry coming over the hill. So it's really hard to sell optimism right now.
Very hard to sell optimism. What I would be concerned about, it's not that whether it's us here at NBC Sports Boston or it's people at 98.5 The Sports Hub or wherever. I'm worried about apathy. I want people to be interested in the team so that they're interested in these podcasts and they're interested in our shows and they're interested in the product. I'm worried it starts to veer into that because it's been years of this now, Tom. Years. And now we might have to wait another full season before we see, for instance, Drake Maye at least get to work with David Andrews or some kind of competency on the offensive line. It's It's really a hard pill for Patriots fans to swallow. You can't cancel the season. I will say this, after being in the Patriots locker room this week, talking to somebody like Ramondre Stevenson, who would have, you could say, some right to be upset at the prospect of him being benched. I talked to Pop Douglas, who was showing obvious signs of frustration on the field. He feels terrible about it. He's actually already apologized to his offensive teammates for it because he doesn't want that to be what he's about, and he knows it looks bad. He was frustrated, not necessarily, he says, about not getting the ball, but more about their failures and third downs and critical situations and things like that. But either way, he told me that's not him, and he apologized to anyone who saw it. Players, coaches, fans. And so those are little moments where I say, okay, the locker room hasn't completely devolved into chaos just yet. I'm not saying it can't happen, but for now, they seem to be holding on to the ropes.
Yeah,
still.
I guess the next level of chaos and dysfunction and teetering is open insubordination toward the coach, or questioning, why did we move on from Bill? Or we thought they knew what they were doing here, and they clearly don't. And now we're just running around out here in a bridge year, and we can't find our ass with both hands, which is a bad place to be if you've ever been there. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed Total Insight. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Patriots pregame live will be at noontime. Phil will be coming to us from the stadium. And he'll have a Next Pats podcast, Phil?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we'll have the aftermath right after the game. 9 to 8. We'll wrap it up for you. See you guys.